So speaking of Cheryl Strayed being empathic, Anna, why don't you tell us a little bit about empathy and how it's different from sympathy?
So sympathy, sort of just in the basic definition, is really just about having compassion for someone else. So you have a friend going through a tough situation, you feel compassionate for that friend. Empathy sort of takes it a step further and really talks about having a shared emotional experience. And so not only are you just feeling compassionate for someone who's going through a struggle, you sort of kind of get down deep with them and sort of feel that emotion that they're feeling, sort of or an extreme version of sympathy, maybe you could think of it as. And I think, we talked about Cheryl Strayed and how she's able to sort of give advice because she's able to empathize with the situation. I think we can maybe extrapolate on that and take it one step further, that how is she able to give advice and sort of not come across as judgmental? And there are a lot of situations in the book where writers are writing in with these questions that really don't portray them in a very good light, right? They're sort of talking about very unflattering parts of their personality or things that they've done. And I think one of the reasons why she's able to give advice without being judgmental is because of this empathy, this shared feeling, which she's able to do because she also has been in some very painful situations. And I think one that stood out to me, where someone kind of wrote in about a situation that didn't portray them in a good light, was this one where a mother spoke about having a bit of an anger problem and sort of at her worst actually sort of forcibly removed her child from a car and sort of heaved the child onto the lawn, I think was sort of the language that was used. And you could see how someone might be judgmental. Oh, that's abuse. You shouldn't abuse your child. You need to get help. But she doesn't say that. She doesn't let the woman off easy. She acknowledges that this is not this woman's finest hour. But she really says, hey, look, as parents, we've all done things that we weren't proud of. We've all had a bad day. We've all done something. But instead of casting judgment, she says, we can do better. Not just you can do better, but she can do better. The other readers can do better, that we must ask more of ourselves. And so that I think she's able to give that advice without judgment because of her empathy, because of her shared painful experiences. And so perhaps that begs the question then, can you be empathic without having a similar painful experience? What do you think?
That's a great question. And I think the short answer to that would be, I think that you can be empathic without actually having gone through a similar experience. However, there are certain aspects to that. So this reminds me of a book that I read last year called Empathy Exams by Leslie Jamison. It's a collection of essays about various topics, ultra marathons. Leslie Jamison writes about her own experience as a standardized patient or a medical actor. But the one thread common to all the essays is the question or the theme of what is it to really understand the suffering or the emotional experience of another person. So certainly that's what empathy is, stepping into someone else's shoes, seeing another person's point of view. But one thing that I took away from that book was really that empathy is not just an emotional thing. It's actually a mental exercise, a cognitive exercise, an exercise of the imagination, maybe, really trying to understand somebody else's experience. And I think that if you have gone through a similar experience, certainly it could make it easier for you to empathize, but it could also go the other way in that it could limit your way of thinking. So for instance, a person who's gone through substance abuse and who's recovered from it themselves, it could make them more empathic towards someone who's going through similar problems. But at the same time, it could, under certain circumstances, also sort of be constraining or constricting, because it could be like, well, I went through this, and why is this person having such a hard time?
Absolutely.
So that's what I think. So I know we've talked a lot about the book, and both of us clearly loved it and were deeply moved by it, and it was very thought-provoking. So in conclusion, Anna, what would you say that you took away from the book?
I think that there are a lot of themes in the book. Obviously, we've touched on some, but I think one of the ideas that she comes back to repeatedly in a lot of her responses is sort of directing the person asking for advice to sort of reflect back on themselves, almost as if you know what you should be doing, but, you know, giving them that little extra push to sort of go the extra mile. So I think one of the themes is sort of, what is your true self? What are your true wants, your true needs? Sort of what is the core of you? And sort of that's where the answer lies. It doesn't answer in all the dirty details or the confusing situations or other people's problems. I think in a lot of her responses, she brings the person back to sort of the more primary needs that the person has. And I think that's kind of what I took away was getting back to your core self. And I think she's got some powerful quotes in the book, and I know that there's one that stands out to you as well.
Yes. No, I think that absolutely. I think the idea of the truth that lives at your core, and when you're in a confused place in your life, or when you're distressed, or when you don't know what to do, going back to that truth. I think that's definitely something that I took away from this book. But she also makes it, I think, amply clear in the book that it's not going to be easy to live out that truth, even, you know, once you become cognizant of that truth. And so the quote that I know you're referring to is, have the courage to break your own heart. I thought that was really heartbreaking, because it's true. I mean, you know, it can be, even if you know the truth, to live it out can be a very, very difficult and an act of courage.
To make a choice where you know you're going to suffer in the process.
Absolutely.
But ultimately, it may be the correct path.
Absolutely. All right. So, well, we strongly recommend this book. We also strongly recommend, this is Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed. We also recommend her podcast, which is Dear Sugar Radio on WBUR. It's co-hosted with Steve Almond. And if you liked our thoughts and discussion about empathy, do read Empathy Exams by Leslie Jameson. Thank you so much for listening.
Bye.